All right, I'd like to call the May meeting of Louisa County Planning Commission to order. Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bartlett?
Yes, ma'am. Here.
Mr. Brooks?
Here.
Mr. Painting?
Here.
Mr. Disasway?
Here.
Mr. Dickerson?
Here.
Mr. Qualls? Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mr. Kersey?
Here.
Mr. Purcell?
Very well. Would you all please rise while we have the invocation led by Commissioner Dickerson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Painting.
Let us pray. Father God, thank you for bringing us together tonight. Thank you for those who came before us, who established and perpetuated Louisa County. Help us to be good stewards of all the resources of Louisa so we can leave it better than we found it for future generations to enjoy. And grant us safe traveling mercies home after this meeting so we may arrive safely at our destinations. In your most holy name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the approval of the agenda. You have the agenda before you. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any comments on the agenda as presented? Very well. Then, with no comments, Ms. Johnson, could we have a roll call vote to approve?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Painting?
Yes.
Mr. Disasway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
The agenda is approved. Next item is approval of Planning Commission meeting minutes from the April meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. The minutes appear on packet pages 2 through 4. Any comments on the minutes as presented? Hearing no comments, Ms. Johnson, could we have a roll call vote to approve, please?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Painting?
Yes.
Mr. Disasway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Very good. Minutes are approved. Next item is consent agenda. There is no consent agenda for May, so we'll move on to public address. I'm going to open the public address period in case anyone in the public would like to address the commission. Public address period is open. I do have one registration to speak during the public address period, but Sue Frankel Street is not here. So anyone else like to address the Planning Commission? Very well, then I'm going to close the public comment period, public address period. Public address period is closed, and we'll move on to unfinished business. I think the unfinished business we have right now is the focus plans, and the focus plans are moving forward, as we just talked about.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
in addition, I sat down with Mr. Eggle and broad concepts of what we'd like to see in those focus areas, such as respecting any existing VDOT highway improvements and minimum distances between, I mean, it's very high level, and he's taking that up the line to trying to get some sense of if we're headed in the right direction and whether or not we want to work with the two members of the board that are on the comprehensive plan.
All right.
So I thought it was a very good meeting.
Mr. Kuhn.
Just for clarification, when you said you wanted to move forward, is the Planning Commission ready for us to advertise for public hearing?
Well, let me clarify my speech. What I meant was, from what we talked about it was very unclear. What we talked about in the work session, it sounds like the work is moving forward on that. So, no, we're not ready to advertise, so.
Very well.
But thank you for clearing that up. So we'll move on to public hearings. First item for public hearing is ordinance change 2025-02. And I believe that is Mr. Kuhn, yes.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Starting on page 5, you'll see my memo regarding the retail sales of controlled substances and then medical services updates. So what we've done here, of course, it's all articulated in the memo and the proposed actions. We have established a new definition for a licensed medical facility to include inpatient care for emergency services that have a licensed physician as well as DEA-regulated dispensing and controlling of substances. We amended the definition of medical office to cover all outpatient services that do not involve controlled substances. So an example of that would be like a chiropractor office. It's a licensed physician, but very rarely do they provide controlled substance, or radiology clinic if they're just taking x-rays and reviewing the x-rays. The other item that we did is because the new licensed medical facility and medical office was encompassing of inpatient and outpatient care, we were able to repeal the clinic and hospital definition because now the licensed medical facility is more inclusive to account for urgent care facilities and different things we'd be able to provide 24/7 coverage as well as accept ambulances. We also revised the definition of the retail sales of a controlled substance to exclude licensed medical providers and identify applicable use types. So you can see farther the updated definitions on page 6, and as well as the areas that the medical office and the licensed medical facility would be permitted by right, and we would maintain the retail sales of controlled substance would require a CUP in those districts listed above. So really the only thing that changed from y'all's last review of this is for the retail sales of controlled substance, we did add and facilities lawfully operate. I'm sorry, I'll read the last sentence in its entirety. This category excludes alcohol, tobacco, agricultural activity passive, and facilities lawfully operating under a valid and active registration with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration as licensed medical providers. So that's the addition there. And I stand ready to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for staff at this time? Very well, then I'm going to open the public comment period on this ordinance change. Public comment period is open. We normally start with the applicant, but since the county is bringing the action, we'll dispense with that. Anyone like to speak from the public? Very well, with no one speaking from the public, I'll close public comment period. Public comment period is closed, and bring it back to the commission for comments.
Job well done, Mr. Chairman.
I think so.
Very well.
We addressed
Then,
everything we talked about, Mr. Chair, last meeting.
with no commentary from the commissioners, the chair would entertain a motion to approve ordinance change 2025-02.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve ordinance change 2025-02. Any further comments? Very well, then, Ms. Johnson, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Painting?
Yes.
Mr. Dismasway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Very well, the ordinance 2025-02 is approved and to forward to the Board of Supervisors. Next up is ordinance change 2025-01, proposed amendments to land development regulations. Ms. Buckler.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. This is the third phase of amendments that we've been working on to the land development regulations. These include amendments to the definitions, and as discussed during the work session, and on packet page 17, We have added a sentence to the vegetative buffer, proposed language that would state vegetative buffers meeting the above criteria shall be shown on a plan prepared by a certified landscape architect, surveyor, engineer, or other qualified licensed professional.
Yes.
Are there any questions on that?
You on page 3?
Yes.
It is on the one that was handed out on page 3, yes. During the work session, Mr. Goodwin asked for language.
I had circled, back on private lane, and this is just a grammatical thing, I think. On page 2, is there a reason when you say an access way for residential use serving less than 3 lots only? What,
So the private lane standards that are in the ordinance, the private lanes are intended to only serve 2 lots.
right, I understand the less than 3 lots. What I had a question mark by is the word only.
That's existing wording. We can strike it if,
The red kind of funny, it might,
it-
Might be good to.
Yeah, it's not needed.
I didn't
Not needed.
okay, we can certainly strike that as part of these amendments.
All right, let me, before we go further, Ms. Buckler, let me have you just finish your presentation, and then we'll do public comment period, and then we can come back with any further discussion on this. But let's get the presentation finished first.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
From definitions, we move to short-term rental of a dwelling. And the proposed amendments here are to correct Scrivener's errors and the omission of the Resort Development District, and to correct the effective date of the ordinance from the original adoption of those provisions. From there, we move to zoning districts and land uses, and this is to remove the additional setback requirement for structures that exceed 50 feet in height in each of the agricultural districts, both A1 and A2, and in the growth area overlay districts. For minimum lot width requirements, this is for consistency in the ordinance. It directs individuals to the location where the minimum road frontage requirements can be found under 86-118. It was included in one area, but not in all of the residential districts, as we've done. For subdivision requirements, we have removed the third-party review firm and added an engineer or surveyor licensed in the state of Virginia. And we did add surveyor as was requested at the last work session. We've included language for the requirement of a performance agreement in addition to the interim road maintenance agreement. That will be another mechanism to provide a time frame for completion of subdivision improvements moving forward. We've added language that the county has no obligation to install or maintain any improvements that are part of a subdivision development, and this is based on language that is in the State Code of Virginia. We've limited private lanes in a subdivision to a maximum of 2, and added language that requires the security posted with the county for subdivision improvements to be reviewed every 24 months to ensure that sufficient funds remain in place for project completion. And there were several options. The one in the packet is using the construction cost index published by Engineering News Record. And as we discussed, other localities use a defined percentage increase or require the developer's engineer to provide an update. It's up to the Planning Commission which method they want to move forward with. Under the plat approvals, we've added language that requires the private road disclosure language be included on all subdivision plats. And this would indicate and put the buyers on notice that the roads are private until they've been accepted into the state secondary road system. And the plats will also be required to include a note that an entrance permit must be obtained from VDOT for access to each lot shown on that subdivision plat. Under the Lake Anna Shoreline Use and Design Standards, we've added language that clarifies that dry hydrants and restroom facilities will only be required in common areas if required by the Department of Fire and EMS and the Virginia Department of Health respectively. And if these facilities are required, the location will be coordinated with Dominion Energy. The telecommunications regulations have been proposed language to allow generators to be located on site but only operated during power outages or testing, and includes language recommended by the county's telecommunication consultant requiring additional structural reports and analysis be submitted for co-location applications to confirm the structure, safety, and integrity of existing towers. Under the sign regulations, the majority of the proposed amendments deal with electronic message signs. During the work session, the Planning Commission discussed going with the option 2 that was provided. And based on that, on the handout copy that the Planning Commission has on page 20, number 3A has been changed to a maximum of 100 nits between sunset and sunrise as set by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and finishes with, or that can be adjusted to comply with the maximum nit level. We've stricken through the original C because we've moved the between sunset and sunrise to A and changed D to C. And under section 86-689 waivers, we've added additional language. We had in there recommended that standards for electronic message signs are not subject to increase through the waiver process. We've added an all request for variation would require a special exception by the Board of Supervisors. And those would be allowed in the commercial, industrial, resort development and planned unit development districts, both regular and in the growth area overlays. With the zoning administrator approval, or going to the board for a special exception if necessary. And that concludes the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Ms. Buckler. I'm going to open the public comment period now. Public comment period is open. If anyone would like to come forward and speak on this proposed ordinance change, please do so. Seeing none, then we'll close the public comment period. Public comment period is closed, and bring it back to the commission for comments. Do we have any comments or discussion from Ms. Buckler on these changes?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin.
trying to see if I can remember some of the first ones. First is an appreciation. I'm glad that we have fixed the language on restrooms and dry hydrants. My constituent is checking on me every now and then. Are we still working on it? Yep, we are. So it's an appreciation. See if I can, I thought I had 3. Oh, it has to do with lighting. We have prohibited any flashing signs. And also on page 17, it says, messages must be static, no animation, videos, flashing, or scrolling. Everyone I've seen would not meet that. They do not leave one screen up there forever and ever on that. Yeah, the flashing may be every minute as you're proposing. I think that's awfully long. But that's still a flash. Whether it's every minute or whether it's every 20 seconds or whatever. So I think that wording might need some work. Does that make sense to you? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, on that. And the once every minute, I'll repeat what I said during the work session. I think that's excessive. Particularly with some of the uses, if somebody wanted to get petty and complain. Churches probably have 5 or 6. You know, they're talking about special events. They're talking about when church service is, when Sunday school is, Wednesday night prayer, Bible study, things like that. And to have it up at once every minute for a church or a business is not very informative. Even in town, I can go faster than that. Maybe not doing school hours, but I think we had talked about some of them are a minute, some of them are 20 seconds or whatever. I just think a minute's awfully long.
You are correct, Commissioner Goodwin. There were differences in the ordinances that we looked at from other localities, and they did range from 15, 20 seconds. A minute was the longest interval. We put the most restrictive in here. You all are welcome to recommend, something lesser. 1 minute is a long interval as you're driving to try to read.
And also, just the message cannot change more than once every minute. So, if we want it once every 30 seconds, or twice in a minute, or 3 times in a minute, because that's, like you referenced, that if they're having 5 in a minute, that's getting to the point that it's flashing, you can't even read it, it's going by so fast.
Right, I'm not saying
So
that.
that was,
I want to see a limit on how fast it goes, because that is distractive. That's a safety issue. But I just think a minute's awfully long. We had voiced during the work session, maybe 20 seconds. And on 33, you're still gonna see one, because you're doing 55 miles an hour. By the time you see it, you're gone.
so if
But
that's
that's
the ca-
okay, that you don't get to read everything, but
So then if once every 20 seconds, we could just say more than 3 times every minute. And that would be
I'm
20
just one
seconds.
member of the commission, but that's my thought on the thing. You're really taking the usage of the sign away at 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dickerson.
I agree with Commissioner Goodwin, but I think like 20 seconds or 30 seconds would be better than 2 or 3 times a minute, because you could have a short one that distracts you and then have a long 40-second one, and then I think you got to have some time in between them or the drivers get distracted, or at least I do.
I'm okay with that. I don't know if anybody else has got ideas.
I think that's a good idea. You could have two real quick flashes to grab the attention and then a long message. And that, with this, if you're driving, that may be enough to take your eyes off the road suddenly, because you're getting that kind of impact. So I think you're right. I would keep it at no more than once every, and then it's however many seconds. So
And that makes it consistent.
it makes it consistent, yeah. Does, we have 20 seconds on the table. Does any commissioner have any other proposal than 20 seconds at this time?
20 to 30 seconds in a well. Yeah, sounds right.
So, point of clarification here. Do we want to indicate that it's got to be 20 seconds at
No.
a minimum?
No less than
Or
20 seconds.
No less than 20. But so if that's the case, that's what I'm just saying, because we could change the language to say message cannot change more than 3 times every minute, which then they would have the ability to change if they wanted one 5 seconds, one 35 seconds, and one whatever.
No less than.
Okay.
No less than 20 seconds.
So it can change up no more than 3 times every minute with a minimum of 20 seconds.
Just give them the minimum time that they have to stay on. Don't put too many restrictions, because they may want to leave it up a minute. Some of them don't change.
So we're saying messages cannot change less than once every 20 seconds, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And I do think,
Is that-
Mr. Chair,
Ju-
Mr. Barlow,
Just a question, the
Sorry.
2 signs that I know of, one's in front of Thomas Jefferson, the other's in front of the high school. Do we know, and they do flash messages up there, do we know what they're doing? How they relate to the conversation y'all are having now, what I'm getting at?
I do not know the interval.
When I went out there, I didn't time the interval, but I will say the ones that had more information were a lot longer than the ones that was like a quick, whatever, spring break, April, whatever the dates were. That was relatively quick. When it was, an event that was happening the first week of May, it kind of stood up there a little bit longer. So, I mean, there was some variety in how long some of those messages were up there. And there's some that, just like Chairman Dickerson, or Commissioner Dickerson had said, like, it was relatively quick. It was kind of almost like a animation that went through just to catch your attention, and then it was the important information that kind of sat there for a little while. So they've got, it seems like they have the ability to change the duration of the different messages.
Well, I'm guessing that they do have, depending on how long the message is, they can change the message. I just wondered if anybody had checked to see what kind of criteria that they're, so that if what they're doing is acceptable, we're not passing something that puts them in conflict.
I can touch base with the schools before this comes to the board and verify the time.
Mr. Goodwin, did you have a comment as well?
no, I'm good.
All right. Is there any further commentary on this set of ordinance changes?
So am I.
Ms. Buckler, let me just verify one thing. The comments that you made
Yes, sir.
about the changes in section 3 on page 20, they are also reflected in the table on page 16.
So the table is was for informational purposes only to compare the options.
That was not a part of
That is
the,
actually not part of the ordinance.
okay, all right. All right, very good.
Mr. Chair, I think I did have a question.
Mr. Goodwin,
I just found it.
I thought you did.
Were we, it doesn't make any difference whether we're talking about option 1 or 2. What I'm looking at under general requirements, and this is addressed to staff, D, A1D. Yeah, that's the same in both. Must be static, no illumination, video, flashing, or scrolling. That's not true. We just allowed it.
I don't think that means a change in message. I think what that means, static, it doesn't mean the message can't change. It means the message can't do crazy things on the screen. It can't have animations on it. It can't scroll top to
I
bottom.
get
can't
animation and
flash.
videos, but flashing in the contents of what we talked about in the other paragraph of being no less than 20 seconds, can it change? We decided, or I suggested, it doesn't make any difference whether it's 20 seconds or 1 minute, it's still flash,
Well, it's,
as it's defined in here.
I think flashing means kind of thing as opposed to a text message that changes from one type to the next.
I
Yeah.
know what you're
But-
saying. I'm just saying that, to me, we're saying two different things. One, you can change the message every, no less than every 20 seconds. And then we're saying it must be static, no flashing. And we decided in the language that it doesn't say flashing, messages cannot change more than or less than 20 seconds.
And I had noted.
To me, it's a clarification. And scrolling, most everybody does that. The other thing I had a concern about,
Well, let's stick with this one until we
Okay.
get it worked out.
I had made a note to clarify that as part of the recommendation, but we can kind of work it out here.
Do you have a recommendation on how to clarify that?
I don't until I start looking through all of the research that we've done.
All right. Mr. Goodwin, would you be?
yeah, I'm trying to find it now. I know what I want to say, but I just want to make sure
All right.
everybody's at the same place. It has to do with public service announcements. I'm trying to find it, and I can't find it right now. But I read it a second ago, and then I went back to listen to you. But I'm wondering, all I got to do to get around your requirements is put one time and temperature screen on there, and I don't have to comply.
That's one way to say it, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dickerson,
Mr. Goodwin, if we change D, 1D, to be messages must be static for 20 seconds or longer with no animation, videos, flashing, or scrolling during the time period,
That works.
would that cover?
Did Linda get that? Ms. Buckler, I'm sorry.
Messages must be static for 20 seconds or longer with no animation, videos, flashing, or scrolling text.
Now, I'll get to mine is in both of them, in section A1. Says this prohibition shall not apply to signs giving public service information such as time, date, temperature, weather, or similar information. So if one of my screens has the time, date, and temperature, I don't have to comply, because I'm a public service announcement. I know that's not what you mean, but that's kind of what the words say. It says it doesn't apply. And I think that's only, in option 1 on page 29.
That's actually existing language. That's what's in the ordinance today.
Well, while we're discussing, I'm saying it's a free out here. If I put one of those screens in there with date, time, and temperature, then these restrictions don't apply. I gotta just make one out of 3.
Then you still have to abide by the 20-second rule, as we discussed earlier.
Not according to this.
So this is prohibited sign is flashing. The other section of the sign is the electronic message sign. So there's 2 different sections, so it's left to abide by that other section. No more than one sign per 20 seconds.
Then I'm still confused, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Continue.
Mr.
I'm still confused what we mean by flashing. We just decided that flashing was no less than 20 minutes, 20 seconds. But when I look at this definition, all I gotta do is make one of those 20-second time temperature. I don't have to worry about the flashing regulation.
How would you define the flashing? And the main issue is you'll have individual signs that will have the red and blue flashing that articulate, that mimic emergency vehicles to grab people's attention. How would you define that to prohibit it?
As an animation,
Is it an animation or is it flashing?
it's an animation.
I'm not sure.
What's it animating? If it's lighting up the
Emergency-
screen
an
red
American-
and blue,
American
or blue,
emergency vehicle.
that's where.
That's
this
an
is-
animation of American, it's not letters, it's an animation of an emergency vehicle.
But if it's just flashing blue a couple times to get your attention, it's just flashing.
If it's not an issue, Mr. Coons, then I'll drop it, but I read that as an easy out. I just gotta make one of my screens have that on there and that
There's other
apply.
items in the ordinance that, if they were doing something similar to that, that this zoning code would allow us to address.
Okay,
Mr.
like I said,
Goodwin?
if you don't think it's an issue,
Ms. Smith?
What if they put in there, didn't apply to signs solely giving that information?
solely, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So it would say, shall not apply to signs solely giving public service information such as time, date, temperature, weather, or similar information.
Got it. I'm good with that. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Good catch.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Painting.
I would just like to maybe bring back to the board's attention, I think the primary complaint about the signage, the digital signage, was the brightness of the signage. That was the original context of why we're addressing this, which I think we're trying to control that through the nits of that. So this would certainly conflict with the high school signage. The high school signage is animated, it is scrolling, it's a constant change. When you drive by, there's always something moving around, dancing on it, unless it's stating something. So it would certainly conflict with that, and I'm pretty sure Jewett is the same way, that Jewett Elementary is animated. And again, I'd just like to bring it back to, I think we're more concerned with the brightness after hours. during hours of darkness and driving. And then I kind of compare this to the large Lamar billboards along the interstates. Those are digital now, and there's animation on those as well, which is, it can be distracting, but I really think it's the brightness of it that is our main objective to conquer here. Just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
And we will speak with the schools to try and address their frequency of changing the signage and what their capabilities are with their signage and bring that to the board as well.
If I may, sir.
Yeah,
To what you're saying, Mr. Coon, absolutely. But and again, the high school signage is much older, and it's a darker signage. And generally, I think I think the back screen of it is black, and like when they have a line running across it, it's green. So that's just not at all. You almost have to stare at it to even figure out what's happening on it. So it's like from one extreme to the other on the signage. Just to put that out there. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Well,
Goodwin.
we talked earlier, just like a commercial business, the superintendent of schools would come in and ask for an exception. Being part of the curriculum for art and commercial advertising or whatever they've got on their curriculum, go in and say, I request an exception, just like a citizen.
So in the definition of electronic message sign, we had included language that signs permitted prior to the effective date of the ordinance must comply with all lighting or illumination standards contained in Article 5 signs within 12 months. All other sign features would be considered legally non-conforming if they are existing permitted signs. So only the brightness would have to be brought into compliance at night, the nighttime brightness. Everything else related to the sign would be legally non-conforming if it's permitted, if it was permitted prior to the adoption of this ordinance.
It's reasonable.
Yeah.
Part of the reason for
good.
that is some of the older signage, that they just they won't have the capability to make some of these changes, and that's even the sign companies have indicated that the current signs can do it, and that's kind of par for the course, but older signs, there's gonna be just capability limitations that we've got to account for. So that's why we have to have a little carve out for that, which, of course, the board is required to come get a special exception, but, there's nothing they can do about their sign. That's where the legal non-conforming use
Yeah, that's
is. We can't require
Perfect
them.
reason for an exception. Yep.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Painter helped me out here just a minute ago. I was trying to figure what has prompted, and he was saying it's the brightness of the signs, and certainly the one in front of TJ that one's kind of bright. But is your department getting a lot of complaints on signs? I mean, what's sort of driving this, I guess, is my question.
We were directed about the need to address electronic message signs and the brightness.
Yes, we have been getting complaints. Different constituents have been reaching out in different methods. I've had a couple contact me. The 33, there's a couple of churches on there that have some pretty bright signs. DJ was one of them that they mentioned as well, that are just too bright. And it's just something that we had brought up as an item that we might want to address. And of course, before time change, when the sun goes down a little bit earlier, it's more prominent than now. But we have gotten a couple concerns about the brightness of it, and there's a couple buildings that have added signs without any sign permits and not taking into account any of the sign rules or regulations that also have played a factor in this. So it's a little bit of everything, but yes.
But it's primarily, as Mr. Payne stated, the brightness is what people are questioning, that kind of thing.
The brightness and then the speed at which the signs change, because then it's like, like someone's flashing their brights at you when it's bright a couple times, and then it goes to the message they think it's unsafe, especially on a road like 33 that isn't just a straight road.
I
I
think these are
haven't
good
had no
changes.
complaints in my area, it's reasonable. Maybe we don't have all those fancy signs down there.
Other districts, that have the individuals that, complain about those signs and other things are main focus.
Mr. Goodwin?
I'd like to make a motion.
Very well. The chair will entertain a motion on this.
I move that we recommend approval by the Board of Supervisors of the proposed amendments to Chapter 86 Land Development Regulations, Phase 3, with the changes that have been discussed and agreed upon tonight.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion on this? And I'm assuming, Ms. Buckler, we have the changes properly captured. Very good. Very well, then, Mr. Eglin, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Painting?
Yes.
Mr. Dissensway?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Changes approved as recommended with changes. That completes the public hearings. We do not have any new business tonight. So what I want to do is I want to move to discussion, and in discussion, we'll pick up where we left off with the shelters, which, as you recall, we had had a discussion of the various proposals placed in front of us, and I'm sure everyone had plenty of time to think about this between meetings and consider it. Do we have any commentary from the commission on the various proposals?
Do you want me to walk through this again?
Mr. Goodwin, if you have commentary, that's fine.
All right. This is taken, I've handed out a piece of paper. If all of you do not have a copy, I've got a couple more up here. I think it's been distributed to many of you electronically, and press has a copy that's present. This is taken off the discussion that we had last month. It's something that has been occupying my mind to the point where I wanted to get my thoughts on paper. And I'm going to skip to the bottom of the back page, because the advantages was exactly what I tried to capture in laying this out. I wanted to make sure that we were looking after the needs of citizens in this county, that in the event of emergency, as well as those that are homeless. To me, it's one of our responsibilities under education, public safety, and infrastructure. I tried to lay out the responsibilities of the county in the event of a state or a local emergency, and they are defined in the code on the first page. That is a direct copy and paste out of the Virginia State, the Code of Virginia. Where you see the three dots, indicates it's an excerpt, but in, I believe, every case, it's because they started out with words that were the same as my title for the paragraph, like duties of the governor. The duties of the governor shall be, and I just ... and picked it up there rather than repeat it all. And I think it also recognizes the role of churches and other non-governmental organizations whose mission is outreach, to to help those that are less fortunate than we are. And the real driver in how do you put something together that recognizes these two entities, government and NGOs, and protect the constitutional right to separation of church and state. That was brought up by one of the speakers last month, that in even considering this, we were in danger of being sideways with the Constitution. He was adamant about that, as I think he should have been, and as I think we should be. And I think it's the proper assignment of liabilities. Try to state in some of my condition who's going to be liable. And we're trying to put the liabilities where I was trying to put the liabilities where the responsibilities are. You're responsible for this, you assume the liability. You're responsible for that, you assume the liability. Now, we have liabilities, the county does, to NGOs. Primarily, we have it in fire, EMS, law enforcement, but I did put a phrase in there, and it's at the bottom of homeless shelter, shall not place undue burden on the county or the, excuse me, or the residents of the county as part of their operation. And what I mean is, if we're getting 2 and 3 calls for fights or sexual offenses, mixing people up, and it's putting undue burden on the sheriff's office, we end up paying for that. It ain't separation of church and state in my mind. You're accepting that liability, and once you get over that, if we put that as a condition on the CUP, then we can shut your CUP down because it's not a safe environment. The main thing that is in here that we started out discussing was the issue of CUP. And I am proposing that every NGO, churches included, go through a CUP process because I believe in the right of citizens to have the opportunity to express their support, their concerns, and make recommendations to improve it. We do that on things that are important in this county, and I think we ought to do it. And I really believe one member of the press would be fully supportive of that. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. I will admit the last 2 paragraphs are not strictly definitions. They include some of the conditions. And that's why I went back and changed it. On the first page, they're all straight from the code and they are definitions, but on the second page, I just couldn't do it without getting into the conditions. If I had a little bit more time, I could probably fool with it and do it, but I like the strict definition that Mr. Coons put up earlier for, I think it was emergency shelter, come up with something in that category. But I'd still like to consider the things I have in there as potential conditions. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you haven't had much time to look at it. I purposely did not send it to you all because I thought that would violate the privacy, doing business outside of the meeting. So I did share it with the chairman. Vocally, I talked to 2 members of the board. I want to get some sort of reading, and I'll tell you, the 2 board members that I talked to felt like they were up against a wall, and they listened to what I told them, and they said, that's got real potential. So I think we might be heading in the right direction. If we're ready for prime time, I can't answer that question, but I think at least a sense of what the board's thinking, and as far as my opinion matters, I think it's heading in the right direction. From where we started, which was redefining emergency shelters based on 40 degrees and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's all I have, unless you all have questions.
I got one.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you for doing all this, George. I really haven't had time to read through it, but you're proposing for emergency shelter and homeless shelter, you need a CUP.
Mm-mm. Only the homeless shelter.
Only the homeless.
Emergency shelter
Okay.
kind of overrides everything, and the governor either triggers that in what the code calls a state of emergency, or the county can do it under a local emergency. Typically, they use existing facilities of the county, whether it's the Betty Queen Center, whether it's the high school gymnasiums. It can be used for power outages, hurricanes, temperature. We had that ice storm a couple of years ago. We lost power, and people were basically homeless in their homes. And the county opened all of that's an emergency shelter.
When
Yeah, that was my concern.
emergency shelters come about because there is an emergency response plan created to address emergencies, and the implementing organization that's creating the plan identifies locations that are suitable to act as these shelters and puts them in the plan, and they become the emergency shelters, is kind of how that works.
And I can add a little bit to that. I've spent a lot of time in code on this. Code also defines something called intra-jurisdictional emergency shelters, which means that, number one, we have to put all of our potential emergency shelter sites and capabilities into a database that is maintained by the Department of Emergency Services. But say Orange had a local local government emergency, and all of their sites were disabled. The Department of Emergency Services is going to call Louisa County and say, hey, I got a problem. Can you help? So they've got that data enrichment to cross lines, but I believe if I read it correctly, it kind of works like the agreements we have with adjacent counties. What is it? Excuse me?
Mutual aid agreements.
Mutual aid agreement. You have to kind of sign up for this thing called intra-jurisdictional emergency plan or something. We could have ended up taking people from North Carolina, not North Carolina, but Southwest Virginia, when the floods came through, because everything got taken out, if we were signed up as part of that. And that's a county decision. And I know all of this needs to be lawyerified, and it needs to be staffified, and I'm good with that. And as I always say, if my assistance will help you and you want to know what are you getting at, I'm retired, and most of the time I can give you my time. So I offer that up, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the time tonight.
Certainly. So we have a couple of options. Does anyone else on the commission have any commentary on what they've seen and heard tonight?
I think it's a good start, but staff needs to have their time to peruse it and comment on it, and so do we. So do I.
So, Mr. Dickerson.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Commissioner Goodwin for his efforts on this. It's great to have something solid to look at. For staff and their attorney, do you all have enough from us to work on a proposal for next month, or?
So I was actually going to go over what I had as a definition for emergency shelter, which hits on some of them, maybe not all of them, but just this way you guys can give me thumbs up, thumbs down on it. So I had emergency shelter means a facility, building, or location designated as part of a federal, state, or local emergency operation plan for use during a declared disaster or emergency event to provide temporary shelter, safety, and services to displaced individuals or populations. Emergency shelters may be activated only under the authority of the applicable emergency response agency and may be operated by public, nonprofit, or authorized private entities. Uses unrelated to emergency responses shall not interfere with the facility's primary function when activated. The reason I put that in there, that's just for an example, the schools being one of the locations we use. School is not occurring when we're under a state of emergency, so that's just something that if in the future we ever had a location that we wanted to use, it's just, you don't want it in a food line if food line's still going to be selling food.
Right.
So,
Mr. Dickerson.
So
yes.
when we had the fire at Twin Oaks and those folks were displaced, they went to an emergency shelter?
We had opened an emergency shelter for their ability to go there, and I think a couple people did.
That didn't interfere with anything that was going on, so we've got a system that works
This is
in place?
Correct. We have a currently established system that this would meet. I will say that I have included some provisions that may not be normal for other localities. For example, I do have declared disaster or emergency event. We do have North Anna Power Station. Situations could arise from that, as well as the fact that it could be operated by public, nonprofit, or authorized private entities. Just in the future, if there's some type of emergency shelter that is provided by an entity other than the local government or nonprofit, just giving them the ability to do that. And I'm sure Chairman Disway knows better than I would if North Anna has any type of emergency shelters on site that may go into effect. So that's just something that we want to make sure that was accounted for.
They might, but probably would not be able to move the public into them because you're moving into controlled space there on the site. But the idea is the same, yeah.
And that's where this would be provide temporary shelter or safety.
It's possible they could be moved into the information center. So there's a possibility there. And if the information center is identified in an emergency plan for that particular use, if it happens to be in the future, then that's exactly what you would do there. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin.
I'm thinking back to some of the comments last month. Line 2. Emergency operations plan for use during a declared disaster or emergency. I want to put the word properly authorized. During a properly authorized declared state disaster or emergency. And that puts the governor and the Board of Supervisors in charge, and we don't have the proposal that came up here that somebody else declared a disaster because it was 39 degrees.
This is designated as part of a federal, state, or local emergency operations plan.
But I think declared, though, is the proper phrase.
Well,
You
we
can't
had
have
somebody that wanted to declare it at 39 degrees.
They wanted to change an ordinance to show that 39 degrees, but declared emergency, who declares an emergency?
The governor or local government.
Exactly.
That's why I said authorized.
To me, you're double dipping, but whatever.
Okay,
I mean,
that's what the code says. 2 people can do it. So, but if you all okay with it, that's fine.
And then this is what we had as the emergency shelter at the last meeting. Let me see. At the last meeting, this was emergency shelter, a facility providing temporary housing and supportive services to individuals or families who are temporarily or permanently homeless. Emergency shelters, which I need to change that to homeless shelters, must comply with all applicable state and federal health, safety, accessibility, and operational standards. And then we did have a religious assembly may operate an emergency emergency shelter, which needs to be updated, I'm sorry, to homeless shelter for the duration of a state or locally declared state of emergency without the benefit of a conditional use permit. So that
You
was,
put the words in here, but you didn't want to put them in the other one. Put state or locally declared here.
so the only building that's going to be an emergency shelter is one that is in coordination with the local government or state government. So an emergency or a homeless shelter is something that
Okay.
individuals would be able to apply for a CUP for.
I don't want to be argumentative. We put it in the second one, but
There's no,
pushback on putting it on the first one, so, but that's okay.
so this is, what we're saying here is that anyone who wanted to operate a homeless shelter, if they were a religious assembly and it was during a state or local state of emergency, they would be able to do so without a conditional use permit. If it was outside of that specific time period, they would need to get a CUP to operate. And the emergency shelter is only in coordination with the local government.
Back to your homeless shelter.
And I do need to update that. I've got emergency.
Since the last sentence is kind of pointless, really.
How is it pointless? This is giving them the right to operate during a local or state of emergency without obtaining a CUP. So any.
So do you do enforcement during state and local and state or locally declared emergencies?
No.
Kind of pointless.
Yeah, but it also gives them the authority to do it without the risk of repercussions.
Well, I think it, to me, it cracks the door. Are you going to require a CUP for having homeless shelter, or are you not? And if you're
Yes.
not, if you are going to require one, then you shouldn't put anything that cracks the door. If you're not going to require one, then you should clearly state, we don't require CUPs for homeless shelters.
Like I said, this is
I
just
don't-
staff's
I don't
recommendation.
think you ought to be-
Happy to make edits.
Yeah.
Well,
I would take it out.
It gives a church an opportunity in an emergency to provide shelter for somebody.
Mhm.
But otherwise.
They
if
can
it-
still
if-
do that.
If it's not an emergency, then they need a CUP.
But they can still do that.
Yeah, but then they could be in violation
Yeah, it'd be a
of the code.
violation 'cause they don't have a CUP.
I'd like to ask, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodman.
I would like to ask Ms. Smith to check on this. I don't think it's in the code. I think you'll find it in the regulatory verbiage on emergency service, Virginia Department of Emergency Services,
Okay.
of where we draw the line on reported, because I believe these places have to be reported and inspected. And what we're saying is, hey, man, it gets bad, I'm gonna go to any port in a storm. And so I'm worried about the wording of what Department of Emergency Services says when you report your potential places, and us just open the doors, say, well, yeah, you can do it without, you do it, any port in a storm.
As long as they're abiding by the applicable state, federal health, safety, and
Your
exercise.
reporting requirement to Department of Emergency Services, and you're saying as long as they're doing it.
We're
but
saying,
That involves, if you, the reading that I've got, a inspection, they have to have certain signage, like maximum occupancy, all of that, they have to have, I'm not gonna try to do it all. I just know that there are rules that they lay down generally for shelters that come under their, homeless doesn't come under them, but emergency shelters do, and they got rules.
and forgive me, anything on this particular slide that has emergency shelter, just for the sake of this discussion, change it to homeless. I tried to add this to this PowerPoint while I was updating
Yeah.
the draft memo for the future. So this should say proposed homeless shelter, and then it should say homeless shelter, and then the two other references where it says, starting in the second sentence, it should say homeless shelter there as well. And then in that last sentence. So that's,
Yeah, the last
The-
sentence, I I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's my fault.
When we exceed our capability with what we've got in the plan, we want the ability to reach out to other potential sources. But my understanding is, in reading those regulatory requirements on the Department of Emergency Services, is that those potential sites, if possible, need to be identified, and there's an inspection involved, and they've got to have the ability to do certain things.
And for this homeless shelter, basically what we would be saying is that during a local or state of emergency, Louisa County zoning wouldn't go after them. Now, if they wanted to open it to their network of individuals they try and help in these types of situations, they could be putting themselves in jeopardy in other avenues. But
Yeah.
this is just like Commissioner Brooks said, this is if a religious organization wanted to offer service during a state of emergency, this is basically our way of saying Louisa County would not go after them for a code violation if that's what they chose to do. Now, there's other repercussions that come with that. There's a laundry list. Been working with different organizations to try and share that list and things that need to be accounted for before that. But what we can do, because we don't enforce any of those or most of those items, is we could delineate that during local or states of emergency, at least the zoning code wouldn't go after them during those situations for trying to render aid.
Well, the other thing I'll say about this is, I think it's gonna be the last thing I say. When we say a religious assembly, can we add NGOs to that? And I'll give you a perfect example. Holly Grove Ruatan Club wants to open their facility down there. And we're gonna let a church do it, but we're not gonna let them do it.
So then,
They're a non-government organization.
could we add another definition that is already defined in the zoning code? I believe that would be a civic club or civic organization in the zoning code
Okay.
to meet.
At the federal level, they call them NGOs. I don't know what you all call them, but
We
it's
have,
more than churches.
Yeah, I agree with that. We had an emergency, we take all the help we can get or want or need.
Yeah,
The only concern I have on that, depending on the type of emergency that's declared, some shelters may be more suitable for sheltering people than other shelters might be.
it'd be up to the
And
organization.
if you say, well, you know, whoever you are, if you open your doors, you can shelter people, there might be drawing people, not only homeless people, but also people associated with the organization who open it, who would normally go to a proper emergency shelter identified for that purpose. Instead of going there, they're going to go here, and they may be in danger more so.
then you need to change the wording in this altogether, because you can't treat churches any different than you do NGOs or, Because then that's-
We're not.
that is. You're saying that a religious assembly can, but Holly Grove Ruatan can't.
No, George. I'm saying, I'm still in favor of striking the last sentence. If you have an emergency going on, you need to direct the citizens to the emergency shelters, identify the emergency plan, because that's what the whole thing was designed for.
Right.
Not go hide under somebody's garage somewhere. I don't know what it is, you know?
That's getting back to what I was saying
So-
earlier, the minimum requirements.
So all I'm saying is, I think it's proper to strike the last sentence in that. That's what I'm saying. Because you set up an emergency plan to address the different emergencies you have. And you have organizations or shelters identified that provide the sheltering requirements for those emergencies you're protecting against. And if you just say, well, you can open your doors, whoever you are, I mean, that opens the doors to anybody in the county setting up a shelter, and now you're defeating the purpose of protecting the population
In a state of emergency.
in a state of emergency, when they're directed to go to certain places. that
Public
have been-
safety is one of the,
So
key
that's,
function of government.
so that's what I'm saying.
I agree
think-
with you.
I think
Now
this
that
is-
you've explained it, I agree with you.
This
Just take the
last
sentence
sentence,
out.
I don't agree with it. I
You're
don't
not
think
gonna
that's,
stop people from going in the basement of a church, but you're not advertising it either.
right. Right, yeah, you're not gonna stop people from going in
Public,
there. No, you're not.
the PSA is gonna go out and tell you where the emergency shelters are. If you choose your basement or the barn loft,
Yeah.
then that's up to you, Hoss.
Yeah, Rebecca worked in the emergency services for the state of North Carolina when we got married. That's what she was doing. And they found out that for hurricanes, they go door to door. It's time to evacuate. Here's the evacuation routes. Here's where you're supposed to go. I ain't gonna go. And the only way they got people to leave is they started asking them, where do you want the remains sent? And people got serious about leaving then. But they'll do what they want to in an emergency. But you
I
set up
agree
an
with you.
emergency plan to protect the public.
I agree with you,
So-
what you're saying. Just strike the last sentence.
I'm just not in favor of, putting these kind of things in where I'm not sure they really belong.
Yeah.
I differ.
Okay,
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with the statement. I think it's a good fourth effort to help out, to do what we can do in an emergency and not make it more difficult and not offer it. Because that's what we're doing.
What's,
We're not making it available without that statement.
Mr.
in
Chair,
there.
Mr. Goodwin,
may I address that?
you may?
What bothers me is where you're gonna place the liability if you publicly in your ordinance promote this, as opposed to allowing it to happen, then you've assumed the liability. But if the county puts that up there, we've assumed some of that liability for advertising that you can go anywhere you want. And I worry about that. Liability was one of the big things that I tried to cover in this paper between homeless and emergency. In this situation with that sentence, I worry about the liability of the county. Putting that out there as a promotion that you can do what you want.
Mr. Coon?
Just to address that, this is saying that they may operate without the benefit of getting a CUP. Doesn't require them to. It's their choice to open the doors.
I know that.
Yeah.
But
So that's-
you are promoting that by putting those words up there, as opposed to taking it out. And allowing people, they can still go to the Holly Grove Rotan Club, or they can go to the local church, or wherever they want to, but it ain't part of our emergency plan.
It's part of the zoning code that would allow a particular use in a certain set of circumstances.
It's not part of our emergency plan to turn the
It's not. It's part of the zoning code. So this is allowing a use to occur during a certain set of circumstances.
That I disagree with. That I disagree with.
Mr. Goodwin, so would you like us to look into what liabilities the county would face if?
That's where we're going at. I mean, we're saying in the ordinance that you can go anywhere you want. And I
Right
just
now,
don't
it's
think
religious
that's a
assembly.
statement we want to make. Now, they're gonna do it anyway, but I don't think, that's not part of the county's emergency plan. We're gonna put so many out there and the rest of y'all fend for yourself. That's what that sentence says.
It says a religious assembly can open their doors in cases of
The
emergencies.
Rotan Club can.
As of right now, no, they wouldn't be able to. But we also don't have the Rotan Club coming and asking us to try and provide aid to homeless individuals, and we do have some religious assemblies that are doing that.
I'm talking too much. I'll let other people weigh in.
Okay.
Disagree.
I think if they have that emergency, they're probably still not gonna come and ask if they can open the doors.
Exactly.
Yeah. The ladies in the area gonna be making pots of soup and spreading blankets out and welcome them in.
Well, I would say probably we have a lot of information that needs to be compiled and presented as an option at the next meeting. Maybe we can have a work session on that, and if sufficient information is pulled together, a work session and public hearing on it.
Can we get a poll of if we're including this sentence or not?
Y'all know where I'm at on that. I like the last sentence in this paragraph. But I also said this, I won't be here next month. I'm on beach week. It just, to me, it's, because the other side of this, the churches won't have to get a CUP to offer these services when it's not an emergency, which is something they don't have to do right now. Correct?
They would need to get a CUP right now.
Right.
Yes. So right now, in the zoning code, it's actually called emergency shelter, and then the definition only allows for individuals, but we don't have this last sentence in it either.
We're dropping the hammer on them.
No, they're required to get a CUP now.
But there's none in place.
No.
That's been used as a shelter.
I believe there have been some churches that have been used as a shelter
Well,
without a CUP. Yes, sir.
I believe we've read some newspaper articles on that in recent past.
I've had a call from a lady, and I won't mention names and churches, but it provided that service during the cold to some homeless folks. And
I
said,
understand.
That's a fine thing to be out there at all. But that was a state of emergency, talking about cold weather at that point in time. But that's where I'm at on it.
Well, you changed one word in there.
Which one?
Next to the may operate a homeless shelter. It was emergency.
Yes, that's what I was saying. I went in here and changed everything that had emergency to homeless, because that's what it should have been. I just didn't get switched over in time.
And the way that reads now, to me, you're back to conflating homelessness and emergencies. Because I'm going to let you operate a homeless shelter during a state of emergency. Well, what kind of shelter are you operating for what? So I'm still.
For individuals that are providing temporary housing to support service individuals or families that are homeless during a state of emergency, they're allowed to open their doors.
Yeah, but now you're going back to conflating homeless and emergency again. I don't know, I'm just, we got a couple.
Yeah, now I'm confused.
Exactly. I mean, Mr. Dickerson.
Can you go back to the emergency shelter definition for just one moment? So there it talks about federal, state, or local, but then when you're in homeless shelter, you just talk about state and local. So should we have federal, state, or local so they match if we're gonna have it?
If you guys would like.
I think so.
If we're gonna have it, I think we need all three.
I don't think, is there a federal state of emergency? That would be act of war, I guess. Not in the Virginia code.
It wouldn't be. It would be in the federal code.
Yeah, but there's no reference to it, is what I'm saying.
Virginia doesn't recognize the federal government.
Seems-
Might be wise.
Mr. Kuhn, the question is, do you need a poll to?
I need direction if we're going to be prepared to advertise for a public hearing. I need to know what to advertise.
I see.
If we just want to have a work session and discuss it further, we can do that, but I need a pretty definitive include or not include.
Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the commission, how do you all feel? Do you feel like we need to be ready for public hearing next meeting, or do you want to have another work session on this?
I think it's another work session.
I would agree.
The one you want to attend.
So there you go. My vote don't count.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pandy.
Oh, no problem, sir. I agree with both points. I see all points here. I mean, they're all valid points. I really think, I like those in here because in my mind, you're saying, we don't authorize this, but under these conditions, it's a natural order of what a church does. And I think of like the last ice storm where people just don't have the ability to get from, one part of the county to the high school or whatever, emergency shelter that the county, has established. So your local church, is where you probably end up at. But so I like this how it reads. I do see your point. I like the way it reads there. I think staff and Ms. Smith would be a huge help. So I don't know that at this point you're ready for a public hearing, public meeting on it. I think this needs to be doctored up by you guys and Ms. Smith to make sure it meets everything criteria-wise.
Not to belabor it too much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr.
But-
Dickerson.
In the second sentence, where it says a religious assembly, how about add or civic organization? There.
So that I need to just go through the zoning code and identify what
What
other.
that right word is. But
Yes, so I'll just,
something there to cover those hunt clubs and Ruijten clubs and, because that's where I'm going.
That's the one I'm going to.
It sounds, well, how about from the rest of the commissioners? I feel like we need one more work session. It sounded like we do.
I could turn this loose if we would agree that these churches were operating within the context of a county-administered emergency plan
and
during the declared state of emergency. There's gotta be, we cannot just say y'all can go wild, because I think having those words in there opens us up to a liability. We sit and said y'all can go there. And they go there and something happens, damn it, we're liable. That's what that says, y'all can go there. And I don't like it. And there may be other words to get to where you want to go. Those I don't like.
Sounds to me like we need another work session. So I would say we need to pull together all the proposed definitions into one for emergency and one for homeless. We need to understand, Ms. Smith, the liabilities that the county would be exposed to with the last sentence here. And we need to be able to have the full discussion on it during the work session at the next meeting. And I think then we can come up with what we need. Any other thoughts? Very well. Is that sufficient information to move forward from where we are now?
we will come back with 2 definitions for emergency shelter and homeless shelter.
Very good. All right. Good, thank you. All right, let's see where we are. Then, in that case, we will move on to item 9, reports. Ms. Buckler, do we have any reports? No reports for May. Very good. I have no announcements, so Mr. Coon is...
Motion that was discussed at the work session.
Yes, yes.
So moved.
No. Who's holding the motion from the work session?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kersey. That's who I was looking for.
2 months ago, I had requested that staff develop information for us regarding the number of lots in the county and their potential development, which would include associated cost. And after they have diligently attempted to put this information together, we find out it is a significant task and probably would require outside resources to be performed properly in order to get us the information we're after. So in that, we're going to recommend that the Board of Supervisors direct staff to develop and issue a request for proposals to engage qualified firms to conduct a countywide analysis of by right development potential. This analysis should include a comprehensive review of all parcels in Louisa County to determine the number of divisions currently permitted by right under applicable zoning and subdivision regulations. The intent is to compile a detailed inventory of developable parcels and their division potential to support informed decisions related to land use planning, infrastructure investment, and growth management. I place this in form of a motion.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Very well. Ms. Johnson, roll call to approve.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Painting?
Yes.
Mr. Dissiswick?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Very well. Motion passes. Thank you. Then in that case, the chair will look for one more motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.